They're bigger than the government. They get in all the legitimate businesses you can, make it legitimate, but you still have on the side all your illegal businesses still bringing in incomes. And it's more and more money and more money and more legitimate things and more illegal things. It's just a vast, vast empire.
America's underworld is a mirror image of American business. In the heart of capitalism, the Mafia is also a capitalist organization. Like the big banking corporations, the crime families lend out money to get rich. From its earliest days in America's Little Italies, the Mafia has been a money-lending institution. Immigrants to the New World have always needed money to get started. The Mafia is ready to lend, but only at an extortionate price. The money it lends is criminal money, the billion-dollar profits of its nationwide rackets, like narcotics, worth $50 billion a year on the streets of America. Pornography, the film Deep Throat, financed and distributed by the Mafia and its associates, has earned $100 million. Big city vice earns millions more. And prostitution. All the illegal goods and services the public demands, the Mafia supplies. The Mafia puts much of those criminal profits back on the streets through moneylenders, known as loan sharks or Shylocks. But their rate of interest is so high that most borrowers can never repay their debts. In spite of their extortionate rates, there is no shortage of customers for the Mafia loan sharks.
When you borrow money off a loan shark, it's for the people that cannot get credit. It's for people that can't go to a bank. It's for people that need ready cash. No matter where you go in this country, there's loan sharks. To get into them, you have to know somebody. Somebody off the streets cannot walk up to a loan shark and borrow $200 or $300. Somebody in the beginning would have to recommend you.
That recommendation you could do without. For Mafia loan sharks, holding court in their social clubs and bars, do not behave like normal bank managers. A borrower has to pay interest on his loan every week. If he defaults, he's in bad trouble.
An individual fell behind on his loan. But instead of coming the first week and saying, Joe, I don't have the money, give me another week, he didn't do that. He didn't show face. He let 2 weeks go by. He let 3 weeks go by. And after the third week, he came into the office, into my father's real estate office. And it was an embarrassment to Joe for the man to come in and say, Joe, I ain't got the money. But where were you 2 weeks ago? Last week. Now you're coming after 3 weeks to tell me? Hey, Rocky, Joe Notch, take him downstairs and just tell him what it's all about. They would take him down to the basement. Boom, boom, boom. Punch him around a little bit. Guy would come up, his face would be all swollen. He'd be quietly escorted out of the office. Now, this is a place of business. They're down in the basement. That happened on 2 occasions. But you be sure, that guy, when he went out, he came back an hour later with the payments he was behind.
Fear of violence is what makes everybody pay. On this undercover film, 2 racketeers talk about a Mafia killer who lent an old barber $500.
I don't believe it. 70 years old.
In 3 years, the barber had paid a total of $8,000 on a $500 loan. Another loan shark victim faced violence from the mob when he fell behind on his payments.
I just didn't have the money. So Christmas Eve, I got one message from him in the form of a smashed windshield on my car. Then I decided to go underground again. And this time, they stuck out my house for a period of, I don't know, months. The three of them used to sit in my house every night, waiting for me to come back. They had planned to do some nice things to me. My wife used to work at night. She was a barmaid. And when she'd come home at nights, sometimes 3, 4 o'clock in the morning, these guys would be sitting in the house drinking her liquor and telling her what they were going to make me do if they ever caught me. Well, needless to say, they never did.
The crime families lend much of their money to hard-working businessmen. When they can't pay back, the loan sharks don't beat them up or kill them. They just take over the businesses, forcing the owners to work for them. The Mafia has used loan sharking to seize a huge legitimate empire. The families own or hang out in every kind of business, from restaurants to supermarkets, from slot machine firms to bowling alleys. They don't just use them to make money. Every mobster needs a respectable job as a front for his criminal activities and to explain his wealth to the taxman. Joe Colombo was a crime family boss. He had a respectable job. In the 1960s, Joey Cantalupo and his father Anthony worked with Colombo in a real estate firm, Cantalupo Realty. The premises in Brooklyn were both a legitimate business and a hive of mafia activity.
Working in the office, I shortly found out who Joseph Colombo Sr. was. And he used my father's office as a front for his illegal activities. Now, Joseph Colombo Sr. was the boss of what is known as the Colombo organized crime family. He had his own private office there with see-through mirrors so he could see who was coming in and out of the office. And on a daily basis, his protégés, members of his organized crime family, would come in to talk business, talk deals, and also various members of different organized crime families would come in to see Colombo. Now, when I say different organized crime families, I'm talking about members of the Carlo Gambino family or members of the Genovese family who was headed by a man by the name of Funzi Thierry. It was a legitimate business, and anybody can come into the office, and if they were ever questioned, well, they were coming in for a mortgage or looking to buy a house or renting an apartment. Well, when I was on the streets involved with the Colombo family, they were involved in various legitimate businesses. And we can go down the line. They've had catering halls, and they still do have catering halls, in which they had infiltrated into because an owner of a catering hall needed money, and they would loan him money. And for that money, they would eventually wind up with a piece of the business. So they wind up in a catering business. And in that catering business, you not only get the weddings, they are also in the photography business where you take pictures of the bride and the groom. They're in the favor business where you give out favors in weddings. You give out favors. They're in where you make up the cards, invitations. So in the catering business, you might have 20 different businesses stemming from the catering business, and they're involved in every one of those businesses. So if you use my catering hall to get married in, you're also going to use my photographer to have your pictures taken, and my man who drives the limousines. The limousine's big business, all right? So all this is coming to me. I'm making a profit on all these things just because you're a nice guy and you're coming to me. But that's one business which you can put your fingers out and wind up with 10 or 15 different businesses from this one business.
In Chicago, the carpet is rolled out for a high-class wedding reception. The instrument cases are carried by real musicians and contain real instruments. One of the first to arrive is the bride. She should be happy, for she's snapped up quite a catch, the son of one of the bosses of the Chicago crime family. James Turk Torello, Outwardly, a respectable businessman. Torello's a mafia loan shark, torturer and murderer. One of the honoured guests is Joe Arnold. For years he ran a shirt company while operating as a mob loan shark and vice boss. This is Jimmy Inandino, another loan shark with a reputation for violence. Chucky English, a capo in the Chicago outfit, runs record, jukebox and vending machine companies. Some wedding guests prefer to read the headlines rather than make them. But Chicago's joint crime boss, Joey Ayupa, isn't so shy. He's in advertising and taxi firms, bought on the profits of big city vice. Joe Ferriola is another mafia loan shark who has laundered millions of criminal dollars, literally through a chain of dry cleaners. The mafia owns so many businesses, it can take care of you from the cradle to the grave.
You go into the funeral parlor business. We had a funeral parlor. I was involved in me, Colombo, Gambino. Not only do we have the funeral parlor business, we're involved with the people who sell the caskets. We do our own embalming. We got the florists who bring the flowers to the thing. So it's one big situation, and it's every business.
Joey Cantalupo's best friend in the mafia was Mike Bellino, a member of the Colombo crime family.
Mike Bellino and the Persicos invested X amount of dollars with a baker, which is a very good bakery. They make a lot of money. And Mike Bellino, for the investment, even though they're still paying it, is on the books of your baker. So once a week, Mike Bellino would go to your baker and put on a smock, throw a little flour on him, like he was getting dirty, so he didn't have to feel bad when he's collecting his check every week to show a legitimate income. So it's just one of those many phases where these people have to show a tremendous amount of income.
Paul Castellano, the present head of the Gambino crime family, is one of the biggest meat wholesalers in New York City.
They have what they call independent meat markets, which is just a branch of Castellano's. Castellano goes and there's all these meat markets, and they have a place called Rambar. Rambar Meats is actually, it's like a chicken produce factory where they distribute chickens to all these places. One of the biggest in New York is this particular business. And they generate legitimate money, even though they're still in the shylocking business and other businesses, illegal businesses. This is a legal business where they can generate millions of dollars a year and chauffeur it and invest it. But the origination of that money was illegal.
Much of the mafia's illegal money has gone into New York's biggest business, garments. 250,000 people work in the city's clothing industry. It's a business worth $14 billion a year. The people who own the trucking companies in the garment center control the industry. Nothing moves without their consent. Trucks bring materials into the center and deliver the finished goods to stores across the nation. That's why the mafia has moved in on the trucking industry in the garment center.
The garment industry in New York is primarily run today by the Italian organized crime families in New York. Each one have various interests in this big, vast industry. Actually, all the Gambino boys, Joe Gambino, Butchie Gambino, Tommy Gambino, they are very big in the garment area. Very, very big. And not only in the respect that they control everything, just about everything. Don't forget, there's other families in there that have a piece of the garment center, but they have the biggest piece of the garment center. But they have their own shops. These people actually go to work every day down to the garment center and work. Like they're supervisors, they oversee everything that's going on.
The big power in garments today is Tommy Gambino, son of the late Carlo Gambino, the mafia's boss of bosses. But this Gambino shows up on none of the mafia family charts compiled by the police. He claims he's a legitimate businessman. He and his relatives own dozens of garment companies and trucking firms which dominate the entire industry. Tommy Gambino may not be in the mob, but state investigations show that many of his associates are. American fashion is dictated by New York, but whenever Americans buy clothes labeled made in New York, they're paying money to organized crime.
Of course, Tommy Gambino, who is the son of Carlo Gambino in the garment district, would protest that he is no member of organized crime.
Well, he's the son of Carlo Gambino, and he did not get established there on his own. He was established through his father and through his father's underlings, and the association just doesn't stop because Carlo died. The structure is there. These people are involved in that area through several decades, of infiltration, and of course their roots are there now. And maybe there are some people would say, well, we're just legitimate businessmen. However, that organized crime backing does instill fear on their competitors.
The Gambinos and their associates have the edge in the garment business. Their competitors won't steal their customers, their friends run the unions, and their workers are unlikely to give them any trouble.
They avoid a lot of problems that an everyday businessman could not avoid. They avoid the union problems. They avoid other strong-arm tactics that can be made against them.
Most clothing manufacturers are outside this charmed circle, but they must all do business with it if they want to shift their goods. The biggest trucker in the garment center is Consolidated Carriers, owned and run by Tommy Gambino. Consolidated and a few other companies dictate whose trucks service which firms. The customer has no choice.
I've been in the business since 1955, and I know that when you get a trucker, you can complain about lousy delivery, you can complain about high prices, you can complain and you can bitch and you can moan, and the guy might do something for you. He might say, okay, I'll make the deliveries better or something like that. But what you can't do is you can't say, I'm going to get XYZ, the other trucker, because he runs a real snappy service from the factory to our receiving room, and we're going to use him instead because there is no XYZ service, and the XYZ would take his life in his hands to go and service you, so he doesn't do it.
The men who run New York's biggest business have many ways of keeping their customers under control.
I will find that my things don't get delivered. I can find that the things are damaged when they get delivered. I can find that the things don't make it to my manufacturing place to get manufactured. I can have all kinds of trouble. I have never put a percentage on what it costs us, but the extra costs of doing business, of course, are part of my life, and we're competitive, and it's part of everybody. Nobody gets a break, so it's a tax that's levied by this organization that is more efficient than the United States government because they collect the taxes from everybody.
This other government doesn't stop at taxing what Americans wear. It also taxes what they throw away. In the throwaway society, rubbish collection and dumping is big business, worth $120 million in New York City alone. In New York, New Jersey, and other states, the garbage industry is controlled by clubs of trucking company owners. The clubs fix prices and decide who gets which contracts. They're really nothing more than mafia fronts. Where there's muck, there's money. And where there's money, there's the mob. When people are told the mafia monopolizes the garbage business in their neighborhood, some respond with fear, few with surprise.
Everybody knows that that's been going on for years. This isn't something new. They just discovered something that's been existing for 25 to 35 years. Everybody knows that.
I don't know who picks it up, but I wish it wasn't by the mafia. That's all I can say.
Why is that?
Why? Because they're a gangster organization.
Well, as long as they keep it clean, that's all I can tell you. I don't care who picks it up.
I definitely don't think it's picked up by the mafia.
Why not?
Because I don't think the mafia has anything to do with it.
Would you care? I mean, truthfully, would you care? You want to live, right? So you live. And don't mind your own business, that's all.
In 1977, the FBI learned that garbage collection in New York's Bronx was monopolized by a company called P&S Sanitation. It was so powerful that no other firms dared compete with it. But P&S did get competition when the FBI set up its own garbage firm and touted for business from dozens of captive P&S customers. Operating from this building, FBI men proved P&S used violence to shut out its rivals. The firm's two bosses, seen here on either side of their lawyer, belonged to the Gambino crime family. Both were jailed for extortion. Recent trials have proved New Jersey's garbage industry is also run by the Mafia, as one outsider found out when he tried to compete.
How does it work? I mean, do you have to pay people off to get work, or do you have to be friends with certain people?
Well, you pay dues to the association, and it was like a select few in there that were more or less organized.
How would you describe those select few?
Circle of friends.
Mafia companies have been shown to control the garbage collection for millions of New Jersey citizens and thousands of businesses. By wiping out all competition, they can grossly inflate their prices. Even the dump sites are owned by the mob.
Now, if you're a private business and you want your garbage taken away, what choice do you have over who takes away your garbage?
Look who's picking up the stop next to you, and look who's picking up the one on the other side, and call the same guy, because that's who you're going to get.
Even if his service isn't any good?
Right.
Even if he charges too much?
Correct.
A guy came to me and he said, your garbage, it was my first day in business, he says, your garbage will be $275 a month. So I said, how do you know? He said, I can tell. So I said, well, how can you tell? I haven't thrown out a paper yet. He says, I can tell by the kind of business this is, it'll be $275. So I said, well, what if I don't want to pay you $275? What if I'm not interested in you taking out the garbage? So the guy said, well, you can take it out yourself. So I said, well, what if I want to call another garbage guy? And this guy said, try it.
How does the Mafia manage to shut out competition in the garbage industry?
Fear.
Fear of what?
Oh, truck burnings, lead poisoning. I mean, there have been three murders in this state in recent years.
All to do with the garbage industry?
I don't think it had anything to do with the way they were combing their hair.
The Westchester Premier Theatre in New York State. It opened in 1975 and collapsed 3 years later, bankrupted by Mafia fraudsters who walked off with $9 million.
Just an old-fashioned love song, coming down in two-part harmony.
Rehearsals with Lena Horne and the comedian Alan King. The idea of the theatre was that New York suburbanites would pay top prices to see top performers who could normally only be seen at big city venues or in Las Vegas casinos.
I ain't ready for that.
Cuddle up and don't feel.
Old Blue Eyes himself, Frank Sinatra, made 3 week-long appearances at the theatre, where he was photographed backstage with Mafia bosses, although the singer later claimed he didn't know who they were. The crime bosses were stealing the takings and giving out free tickets and dinners to other gangsters. The handouts staggered stage manager Jerry Donnellan.
Well, in terms of things that were comped, tickets, dinners, drinks, whatever, there's always a practice of comping in any theater to a small degree to people who've done things for you legitimately, vendors and whatnot who you owe favors, people whose friendship you want to curry for one reason or another. But here, it grew to be ridiculous. I mean, dinners, I would say at times 30% of the dinners in the dining room were comped or on the arm or whatever, and tickets were given away in bulk numbers. I mean, to the point where you were putting yourself in a position where you wouldn't make money even if you sold the bloody thing out. In the early days of the theater, the front row seats were never available to the general public, to the motoring public, if you will. And they were always full of less than savory characters. One description would be wall-to-wall shoulders, fellas with no necks dragging their knuckles on the ground, refrigerators on casters, if you want images.
Now, at a certain point, you noticed different kinds of people coming into the theatre than those you'd normally expect?
Well, if you're saying that a fellow in an $800 silk suit selling popcorn is strange, yeah, I think so. There are types like that, and it seemed very obvious to me that the element that was doing some of the jobs in and about the theater was not from your best finishing school. Can we put it that way?
The Mafia sold Westchester shares at an inflated price, while at the same time stealing the theatre's profits. $9 million disappeared into the pockets of the Gambino and Genovese crime families. They also used the theatre as a front for other rackets.
They were using it for a dump site to do their work. They were actually moving jewelry. They were actually moving paintings. You know, the scalp tickets everybody talks about, there was all kinds of shenanigans going on through that joint. And it was a meeting joint. And things were getting dropped there, picked up. Deals were going down there. I had a deal. I went over there to buy Romanian money at 10 cents on a dollar, millions of dollars worth of it. And I had bearer bonds. And I couldn't get the feds to come up with the money to buy the bearer bonds, so I had to give them back. This was the way it went.
We were doing the Nutcracker, I guess, second or third year in operation, and it was a nice performance by a local but professional ballet company. And at one point in the first act, I had left backstage and come out here in the lobby where we're standing and gone up through the doors over there just to check the scenery, lighting, and just the general picture of what it was looking like from the house. While I was standing on the stairs, one of these security guards, who was, not that I'm petite, but a good deal larger than I am, came up behind me and said, "Nice show, Jerry, really nice." I said, "Yeah, it's a good show." And he said, "Jerry, there's no talking in this?" Which, obviously, the man hadn't seen too many ballets, so I turned around and said no, and they could have saved a lot of money if they got taller dancers in the first place rather than have everyone stand on their toes. And that went right over his head, and he said, "Yeah," and he went away.
The right guys didn't go to jail. You look at the guys posing with Sinatra, they're all who were involved in that damn play. None of them went to jail for the Westchester Premier Theater. Just slugs went to jail. And that's what slugs do. They go to jail.
I'd like to introduce the founder of our entire organization, Mr. Joseph Colombo Sr. Please stand.
Joe Colombo, real estate broker, mafia boss, and one of the biggest con men in the history of organized crime. Colombo founded the Italian-American Civil Rights League to hoodwink all Americans into believing the Mafia did not exist. Colombo played on the feelings of Italian-Americans who felt tainted by the Mafia image and discriminated against by the American government.
The president is knocking us down, the vice president. The attorney general hates our guts. And I don't care who hears it, who knows it, who's here tonight and is ashamed to hear it. Know one thing. They're prejudiced against the Italian Americans. There's a conspiracy in this country against you, the people. Don't.
Joe Colombo used all the tricks of a politician. The mafioso portrayed himself as a father, not a godfather. A family man who swore he wasn't in the family. In 1970, he was named Man of the Year by the organization he had himself founded. To the FBI, the Man of the Year was the same gang boss they had been trying to jail for a decade. It was the FBI's investigations which provoked Colombo into founding the Civil Rights League in the first place.
It was started in Cantaloupe Realty Company. For years, we were being harassed by the FBI. For years. Probably when I wasn't even in the office. From 1964 to 1969, we were constantly under surveillance by the FBI. Actually harassed. They watched you. They walked in front of the office. They took your pictures. They followed you everywhere you went. A constant harassment, which was hard for a man like Colombo to conduct his business, his illegal business, out of the office or anywhere, because all his mobster friends would be coming into the office. They'd be taking pictures of them. So they knew something was going on. So there came a point where Joe Colombo Jr. got picked up for melting down silver coins. And he decided, Senior decided, well, this is going to be an end to this harassment. I am going to form the Italian-American Civil Rights League. And it started in the office. That's where it mushroomed.
In 1970, it mushroomed into 100,000 people gathered in New York's Columbus Circle. Under the statue of the Italian who had discovered America, Colombo appealed to Italian Americans to fight the stigma of organized crime.
And now he reached out to all his people, not only his people, but all the other members of organized crime families, saying, we're going to try and make a stand against the FBI. We're going to form an organization. And what he did was that not only his own people, everybody's people, everybody who was anybody, and he contacted them, and he got the politicians, and he got the lawyers, and he got the judges, all to back this. And everybody was joining this wonderful thing at $10 a head for a year. It was a wonderful idea. And then we used to picket the FBI building and harass. They were harassing us, now we're going to harass them. We're going to go with 10,000 people and walk around the FBI building all night long, just to show them that we're powerful.
The FBI had led the fight against the Mafia ever since Joe Valachi turned informer. The League claimed the Mafia was a fantasy.
Why the FBI? Why is the FBI, in your mind, persecuting the Italians?
Well, it's obvious by just what everybody could read in the paper. Every time you see something, you see that the FBI is labeling Italian people belonging to an organization which they refer to as the Mafia. As far as we're concerned as Italian people, there is no such thing. It's a word that's been invented by the law enforcement agencies, and we don't feel it's right.
You said you felt that there is a conspiracy against you. Do you think that
There's a conspiracy in this country against every Italian-American. We've been saying this, we'll continue to say it, and it's only till it touches them. Now I'll go a little further. Many of the other minority groups are starting to feel this thing. And when they get through with us, they have to go on to the next body of people. And this is where the public should wake up, and this is where the public should start demanding some of these things be brought out to light. And why are they so frightened of an investigation? And why shouldn't there be an investigation on them? And who are they? Are they any better than you, I, or anybody else standing in this crowd?
They moved from a small office, Cantaloupe Realty Company, where it originated, right, to a Pisa catering hall, and finally offices in mid-Manhattan, whole floors where they had their office. So that shows you the growth of this particular thing.
And do you think he was stealing from it?
Oh, there's no doubt in my mind that they were skimming the family, the people, the members. It's very easy to do that because if I'm sitting around collecting from 100 people $10, that's $1,000 in one day. They'll come into the office, and I put it in my pocket. And if I want to go spend it, I'll spend it and say, I forgot about that membership. But they're dealing in tens of thousands of people, so it's very simple for the people to skim money off the top of this particular situation.
To keep money and members flowing into the League, the gangsters in Colombo's crime family toured Italian neighborhoods and rallied people around the flag. Colombo declared unity days to show the strength of his Civil Rights League. To ensure maximum attendance at these rallies, Colombo made sure Italian shops closed down for the day. Going against Mafia tradition, Colombo courted publicity.
The man let the power go to his head. Unfortunately, he saw all these tens of thousands of people out there looking at him. They weren't looking at the leader, they were looking at him like he was a Caesar. He was so big, he saw these people and he loved it. And he just loved it. And then another year goes by and it gets bigger and bigger and bigger. But when he was up on the podium, there were dozens and dozens of politicians who were standing there alongside of him saying, what a wonderful thing this is that you're doing. We have to get the stigma of the Mafia off the Italian people. Why should every Italian be crucified? Because of some organized crime.
Colombo's campaign slogan was numero uno. Italian Americans should unite and become one. But the publicity he was attracting alarmed the men who led New York's other crime families.
The only thing wrong with it, it was bringing heat, not only to the Colombo family, we're getting so much publicity, but all other organized crime families. And the organizations, the other organized crime families did not want this. They want to be left at a low profile. They don't want the media taking pictures of them and watching them and all this shit. So what happens is Carl Gambino and Joe Colombo and my father go to a meeting, and it was said, Joey, step down, get out of the picture, because we don't need the heat. Put somebody else as the head of the Italian-American Civil Rights League. Put a politician, put a judge in front of this. Put an entertainer as the head, not yourself. Back away. And Joe Colombo, I was standing down in the corner there with Joe Colombo, my father. My father says, Joey, don't go through with this thing, this rally. Step down, go in the background. And Joey says, no, I want this. This is my baby.
At the 1971 rally, Colombo was shot in the head as he was preparing to speak. Seconds after Colombo had been shot, the man who had shot him was himself dead, killed instantly by one of Colombo's bodyguards. Colombo was not dead, but part of his brain had been blown away. At the hospital, supporters mounted a vigil for their fallen leader. Among the visitors to Colombo's bedside was the boss of bosses himself, Carlo Gambino. True to the Mafia code of silence, the man who had told Colombo to step down from the League had nothing to say. Colombo survived for 7 years, but never recovered. He died in 1978 when he was given a spectacular funeral in the grand old Mafia tradition. The Civil Rights League, which Joe Colombo had founded, was dead too. A cruel fraud on the Italian-American people. Newark, New Jersey. Most of its inhabitants are black and Hispanic, suffering from the highest levels of unemployment and poverty in the USA. Newark is a city that is falling apart. Detectives serving in the County Narcotics Squad have had a tip-off. They're working with Paddy Carr, a veteran Newark policeman. The operation is all too familiar, busting drug dealers in a city where drug dealing is now the main industry.
That's all right, we'll be enough. All right? I'll be right behind you.
Thousands of people are arrested in Newark every year on drugs charges. Today's arrest, a Hispanic suspected of selling cocaine to an undercover cop.
Listen to me? Yes, you understand English, okay? We're police officers. Man, you're under arrest. You're selling drugs. An undercover officer. Hand behind you. Put the cigarette down. Hands together. What are you doing here, my man? What are you doing here?
I was picking my friend over here. He worked with him.
Picking your friend up. Swing together. Stand up. Mike, get him in the car. Man, listen up, okay? Understand you repeat it to him in Spanish. You have a right to remain silent, okay? Anything you say can and will be used against you in court, okay? You understand that, all right? You have a right to talk to an attorney, okay? If you can't afford one will be appointed to you by the court, all right? You understand your rights. My man, come here.
Despite the massive growth in drug traffic, the narcotics squad has only half the men it needs. Newark hasn't got the money to fight an epidemic that has engulfed the city with 10,000 drug addicts.
Right in here. I'm gonna tell you something fucking now. You understand me? Listen to me, understand me. I wanna know where the rest of the shit is. You're going to fucking jail. You
Tell me where the shit is now, and I'll cut your play. If not, I'm gonna put you in fucking jail for next week. You're gonna spend in jail. You understand me?
Want to see what these guys carry?
Yeah.
It's their self-defense weapon. You can kill somebody with that thing.
What do you want to do? Where do you live? Where? Where? I asked you where you
The narcotics squad has been overwhelmed by the drug explosion that has hit America. The city is now almost impossible to police, and yet only 25 years ago, Newark was a boom town with a great future.
It was a thriving business community, and it was a great place to live. Everybody worked. It was a very middle-income type community, and it was a large city, and it was probably the most dynamic city in the East.
Newark's decline began in the 1960s when the Mafia went into partnership with the city's politicians. The Mafia also controlled the city's crime to the exclusion of every other race.
Not only were legitimate avenues blocked for the black minority in Newark, but illegitimate avenues for activity on the part of blacks in Newark was also blocked. What we find was that organized crime controlled both the legitimate and illegitimate sectors of the economy in Newark. When such a situation arises, it's inevitable that you'll have a full-scale revolution or disorder.
In 1967, Newark went up in flames. It was one of the first big civil riots in modern American history. The National Guard and the rioters battled it out on the streets for 4 days. 26 people were killed and 1,000 were injured. Arsonists and looters caused $10 million in damage. The city itself has never recovered. 1,000 blacks were arrested and race relations in Newark were damaged beyond repair.
Well, there was a terrible riot in Newark. It was one of the first ones, and it was a frightening spectacle because suddenly a major city was in flames. You were walking the street, gunfire would break out. You actually had tanks coming down the street, soldiers with rifles, machine guns being fired. It was bizarre. It was cataclysmic. So they had a commission to inquire into that afterwards. I think it was called the Lilly Commission. The president of AT&T, I think, Bob Lilly, headed it. And they made a finding that one of the primary reasons for the riots was, and I think I'm quoting him, but it's a long time ago, was a pervasive feeling of corruption. Another quote, that everything in City Hall had a price tag on it.
The man who wrote out that price tag was Hugh Adonisio, the mayor of Newark. Adonisio was elected mayor in 1962. For the next 8 years, he demanded a 10% kickback from companies wanting major contracts from the city. Adonisio's master was the local mafia boss, Ruggiero Boiardo, an old-time capo in the Genovese crime family with a murderous reputation. The mayor denied he was the mafia's puppet.
It's been said that you are not really the mayor of Newark, that, as you know, and that Boiardo is actually the mayor. What about it?
Well, of course, I disagree very strongly with that. I was the one that was elected. I've been conducting the business of the city of Newark for 8 years. I think that that's just somebody who speaks and doesn't know what he's talking about.
Well, the implication is that you take your orders, you get your orders from Boiardo.
That's absolutely false. There's no iota of truth to it.
You're going to continue to fight this charge against you, Mr. Mayor?
Positively. There's no question about it. I'm going to fight because I'm innocent.
Everybody said that corruption was a, quote, way of life, that you couldn't work unless you paid back 10%. Okay. We subpoenaed the records from City Hall in truckloads. We subpoenaed all the contracts which were awarded for a 5-year period to engineers, suppliers, construction people. From that, we ascertained who were the successful bidders. Then we went after their books and records, and they came in by the truckloads as well. What we were looking for was cash. We had 2 principles. Number 1, a dishonest public official usually does not take a payoff by check. And second of all, a businessman usually does not walk out of a bank with $10,000 or $15,000 or $20,000 in currency for a legitimate purpose. So it became simple. If you looked in the records of the businessmen and you found checks drawn for cash in large amounts of money, that meant that a businessman went into a bank, cashed a check, and walked out with greenbacks. You knew it had to be for an illegitimate purpose.
As a result of Stern's investigation, Adonisio was charged with extortion and corruption.
I expect to be exonerated. In the meantime, I'm returning to City Hall to continue to run a very effective and efficient administration. This is a very difficult city to administer, and we're certainly trying to do the job here and solve the problems. Other than that, I have no further comment.
It was all bluster. Adonisio was destroyed in court by Herb Stern, who exposed the corrupt regime that had looted City Hall.
There was a very famous piece of testimony given by one of the witnesses of the trial that when he was asked why he would give up the United States Congress to run for mayor of Newark, he's reported to have said, and the jury heard this, that he could make $1 million as mayor of the city of Newark.
In 1970, Adonisio was convicted and jailed for 10 years. He was to die in prison. Since his day, Newark, the city that the Máfia and corrupt politicians defrauded and destroyed, has sunk deeper and deeper into despair.
The streets have turned into a jungle. At night, no one wants to travel on them. It's like a 9-to-5 city, and after 5 o'clock at night, even the downtown areas, not a place that anybody would want to take their wife and stroll, shop, window shop, or anything like that. To me, the city is just dying. I probably would say that organized crime, behind the whole thing, I don't think that they set out to do this, but it's just the corruption that comes from organized crime and the money that's passed around and made so easy for people to take. They just keep taking out of a community. Organized crime, a lot of people make the reference that they ought to run the government. They're the only ones that seem to make money. But they just take things. They give nothing.
Newark is a textbook example of what happens when organized crime corrupts a political administration. So it becomes too expensive to do business in the city. The riots that emanated as a result of the corruption forced many businesses to leave the city, move to the suburbs, and as a result, the economic base of that city moved to other areas. And today what we find is a city that's basically struggling for its own survival.